Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Exposure Scientist podcast. Today, we are speaking with Dr. David Ayers, and we're going to be talking today about ensuring workplace safety and the role of the occupational employee monitoring in the workplace to ensure safe conditions for not only your employees, but potentially your visitors or guests or building occupants as well. Dr. Ayers, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, please?
Just in a very brief sense, I have been doing safety for about 30 years. I think it is probably the best job I could have ever had because I really want to help people. Um, and I think over the years, I think I've switched from the hard skills to the soft skills. At first, I was very focused on, it always has to be educational based. And now, as I get older, I realize if you really build those relationships, the things that you have in common, you could really get past anything. You know, um, that's probably about it. I don't want to just keep talking, of course. No.
No, that's fine. That's what we're here to do. No, that's great to hear. And actually, one of the things I love about this is sharing your individual experiences so people can learn from it. To learn that there are paths that you take during your career, and some things you learn more from others. And that's what I definitely want to kind of let the listeners know and talk about today.
Oh, thank you.
So again, since today's topic is the discussion of workplace safety and occupational employee monitoring, from your perspective and your experience, I'd like to hear, I'll say even good or bad, what you kind of see the importance of occupational employee monitoring from either an industry perspective or consulting experience, or the different kind of scenarios that you've been exposed to as far as the application of that monitoring.
Okay. Well, let's just dive right in. One of the things that I really like to focus on, and this is something that's some people kind of go back and away from, is what chemicals are actually in the workplace. What could be the worst case scenario? Let's look at the engineering controls out there. And I don't know if I've just been really lucky or just blessed, but I've always had fantastic bosses and fantastic workplaces that we could go back in and say, well, how do we make things better? Let's not torture people with respirators. Let's not do physicals. Let's not do these things because um, I've always ethically had a hard time with I can't expose you up to a certain point, and then I can't expose you after that, and then I have to do physicals and all that. It just seems that I shouldn't have to expose you to anything out there. So, and I know I was on my soapbox for that one there, but we want to look around at just if you're brand new to the workplace, you're going to have to just like literally walk through. You're going to have to look for the different hazards out there, try and identify things. Uh, the human nose is not very good at picking up scents. So I have run into a bunch of people who say, well, I don't smell anything, so it has to be good. Well, that doesn't mean it's good, but that also doesn't mean it's bad. So you have to have that good data out there to really go forward. Um,
No, no, I think
well,
that's valuable advice, and especially to the young career safety and hygienist individuals that are out there that may be listening, because you may get you. It sounds like you've had good experiences, but you may get
mhm.
pushbacks from some places, like, well, why do we need this, or can't we just, like you said, can't we just make them wear respirators? Having
Oh yeah.
demonstrable data that shows why you need to control the hazards at the workplace is definitely, I think, something valuable.
Oh yes, yes, yes. And I have worked out a couple places that also had wanted to have that negative data too. Is to say we've done everything we possibly can. So let's go back and really confirm the engineering controls, not yeah, we put in exhaust and the hood. Everything has got to be cool now. How do you really go back and have that data? And you can really prove people have not been exposed. So, not to deviate off topic too much, but I did work at a um, plant, and we did a bunch of semiconductor stuff. And I think we had like 256 different monitoring points, and of course it continuously ran, and we were looking for anything we could out there: arsenic, phosphorus, HCl, ammonia. Gosh, there's like the whole gamut of that stuff. And the company really wanted to have that negative data to really make sure, of course, that nothing and they were really after zero, not just we're under the pill, everything's awesome and all that, but they really wanted zero at all times. And it was really good to go back and confirm and say, yes, all of the engineering controls are working exactly the way they're supposed to work.
I mean, that's amazing. I love hearing stories like that because I'll be honest, I've heard the other end of the distribution where they don't want to know the information. You know, they have installed engineering controls and no one has verified that their local exhaust ventilation has worked in years. And when they do their monitoring or test the airflow, it's not working at all. They had not
Yes.
known. And then it's the people that now they know they have to do something about it kind of scenario. Whereas before they didn't know, everything was fine.
Yes, yes. I did have a friend, and of course, I'm not going to say, the friend's name, the
Of
company
course.
name, and everything, but he called me and he had a lot of ethical concerns out there. And one of the ethical concerns is that, he could literally smell this chemical. So, of course, you don't really know how strong it is. The human nose is not that good. But once he brought up the whole, we really need to do sampling and figure out, is this good? Is this bad? Like, where do we go? He looked over at the SDS sheet. It didn't have a PEL, didn't have a REL, didn't have any of that stuff. And the legal folks were asking him, well, if there's no PEL or REL, I don't know what we're going to measure against. How do you prove harm if nothing's been proven harmful yet? And I think all of us that have been in safety for a while understand that there's thousands of chemicals out there, but the PELs are um, most bells are from when OSHA first started back about 1970. Some have been updated and some have not been updated. And many times they really didn't have a scientific measurement. They just kind of said, we're not really sure what's harmful and what's not for the human body. Why don't we start with 5 ppms until we gather more data and understand things more? So it takes them a really long time to update these pills out there.
Yeah.
Um,
No, and I have seen it where additionally, you know, if there's a TLV established and it may be lower than the PEL, and you say, well, I want to, you know, I think this is more protective, and they say, well, that's not the legally enforceable level. Let's go for it. It is very
yes,
frustrating,
yes.
and it is hard to deal with from a science standpoint because you know what needs to be done and should be done. How do you balance that? And that's a discussion for probably a whole nother day.
Yes, 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 yes. So another kind of boring story, but maybe not boring story. Um, we're working with a bunch of lead type solder and that kind of stuff. Then, so it's in a paste form, and we're doing all kinds of sampling for air. We can't find anything in on a airborne, but when you do a wipe sample, you can find it places. So, but people come back and say, but there's no standard on a wipe sample. There's no standard. Well, you know that it's out. You know that right from the get-go, your housekeeping is spotty, if best. People are not following hygiene. They're not changing gloves. They're not doing these kinds of things. And then it just kind of ends up being almost like rabbits. You get 2, you get 4, you get 8. You can then find it on the phone. You can find it on a mouse pad. You can then start to find it in places that you should not be finding it out there.
Right.
Um, and I think that we've all seen somebody who has spotty hygiene in the workplace, and they will scratch their eyes, their nose, put their finger in their mouth to get food out. You hope that they're following real good hygiene inside these labs.
But it is definitely hard to you can give all the people all the training, but they have to take some responsibility and conveying the importance of what we're doing to them is not always easy.
Yes, yes, yes. If I could go back to the respirator question for a second
Sure.
too. Um, Beards are super super common these days. It's the
Yes,
it's
they
the
are.
it's the cool in thing. So it's really hard to talk to somebody and say, well, part of your job is to have a clean shave every day. And there's been a lot of pushback when somebody says, but I typically only wear it about once every 2 weeks for half an hour or hour. I don't see where I have to have the clean shave every day. So those types of battles are really hard to do. So, and I have found that those battles are not for me to fight. It really
Yeah,
has to be for the folks in like HR and who write the job descriptions, who interview the folks to really understand and set that tone up front. It can't be we bring them in, we give them the physical, they already have a beard, and then say, well, guess what? We really didn't mention this in the interview, but you need to shave every day, you know.
yeah.
So really has to be said up front to help them out as much because some people that really is going to be a showstopper for them because a beard is just a way that they express themselves and the way they want to look and all that stuff.
Sure. So s- pigeonholing that into what I want to talk about as far as exposure monitoring,
Hmm.
as far as what people are doing in the workplace and what they are willing to do, what have your experience been with, and I'm not talking about area sampling, well, that could be something as well, but what about actual employee monitoring if you're putting on some personal samples on individuals? What have your experiences been? Because I know what mine have been, and some have been very good. People are like, tell me what I'm being exposed to. I want to know. I want to have the other that, and others like, I don't want to wear that. That doesn't. I don't care. So, what has your experience been in that regard?
It's been mixed. I have seen where people say, "Hey, awesome! This is great that we're going to do this every single year," and I have had folks who say, "So how can I do this and then do my maintenance today? How can I get on my back and my side and I'm laying down and I'm reaching up over my head to screw parts and do stuff?" So I think it has been a mixed bag out there. Most of my work has been over at government sites, so we have not been able to have things we can link to software and the real time monitoring and all that. So it still is kind of like your old fashioned place where you have to send the tube out to the lab. The lab has to do it. They send it back to you. So I have not gotten into like the new high tech stuff where you can wear it and literally look at your instrument. And for the most part, it's just a very gross estimate too. Like it'll say, hey, your oxygen was at 20.9 the whole day for X hours or something. So it's a really good system, but you have to have the workplace where you're set up and ready to go for that system. So,
I'd say set up and ready to go, and the support from above. If you
oh
want to put
yes,
something
yes,
out, yeah.
yes, 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 yes. Um, So I have found that with these new ones, of course, they're really nice. You don't have to calibrate them. You don't have to. I mean, it's literally super easy to do. And when we think about the ones that you and I did, like way back when, you got to get like the pump just right and the flow just right and all that stuff. So it's a little more challenging out there.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, if you have seen or had any opportunity, so it doesn't sound like you've been able to implement any of these, I'll say, wearable sensors or what have you in your
Not yet, sir.
applications.
No, no.
I think there is a lot, and there's is from what I have heard in our organization, the AIHA, that there's a big push towards using more and more sensors and understanding the validating the data that can come from the sensors to make it even more reliable. I think that's going to be a place to go in the future. And any early career individuals who may be listening, I think that's definitely a place to get up to speed and know what the abilities and limitations of some of these sensors and devices are, because
Yes,
there's a lot. It's probably going that route. It's sometime soon. The
yes,
way things
yes,
are going. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I kind of ask people this, and I have seen it and heard lots of different stories. We've talked about employee monitoring and what the ramifications are and what the data means. Is what have your experiences been? I'll say, um, I'll compare it to historical experiences versus current experiences with OSHA and how they're applying their, I'll say, regulation of facilities that you've worked under, if you have had those experiences in a health versus a safety aspect, and how they're kind of looking at the facilities where things that may have been done 30 years ago versus how they're doing things in more recent time.
okay. Thank you. I would say that for the most part, they've been very focused on the safety side. Now, on the health side, they want to see all the different sampling data and all that. So you have to sign a I can't remember what form it is with those guys, so that they can look at it and kind of see the employees' names, and all that kind of stuff then too.
Right.
Um, but it's been very, very, very positive, actually. I don't see these guys as being the bad guys or evil. It's really awesome when they can come in and say, you're doing a great job, but we have seen where other places have done this, because then I can steal a bunch of good stuff from those guys too. Because
Sure.
I kind of get stuck with, well, but this is what you're stuck with at your over at your workplace. I know that some people are doing great things, and I just haven't talked to them. I haven't discovered it and all that stuff. Now, when they go to the energy place, the paper mill, all the different places, so they're really seeing a lot of different industries out there too.
Hmm.
So for me, it's been a fantastic, really positive experience, and I haven't really seen that much of a change over the years.
Okay.
I, it it does look like at times, like currently, they're really focused on things like silica and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff then, and that was not a big focus in the past. So they're starting to look more at the health aspect. I just have not really seen where that's been a change at the places that I've worked yet.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that feedback. I mean, I've heard lots of different stories on what they're looking at. So it's great to hear the positive experience that you had and learning from them. Because I think when you're able to be exposed to a number of different industries, like you said, they see lots of things and they see good and bad.
Yeah,
So,
yes, yes, sir.
I can
Hmm.
only imagine some of the stuff that they definitely get to see. As far as your experiences with current enforcement from OSHA kind of regulations. Have you seen have you seen them want to? You mentioned them looking at the exposure and the health monitoring data. Have you seen them ask for more and more of that to be submitted, or like ask for additional samples that you may not have currently, or say we think you should kind of do this sampling methodology? Have you seen them give you guidance to say it may be more robust if you do this in this kind of scenario?
I haven't seen that from a sampling aspect, but I've seen it from going back and confirming your engineering controls. So I have a whole series of lab hoods, and so they would like to go back and look at the reading on the lab hood and how did you figure out your different quadrants? How'd you come up with your average? At a lot of places I've worked, you had to have an average of uh, 70 CFM going across the face to make sure that nothing's getting back over on the human.
Hmm.
Anything that was cancer causing had to be 100. And so that's always been really good. And of course, have some different questions like how'd you go back and measure it? How'd you come up with here's your sash. Your sash cannot go over this, you know, because
Right.
in a ideal world, it would be awesome to say, hey, it raises up a foot and that's it. But
Yeah.
we all know that's not always logical and reasonable given the experiment you're doing or other
Right.
things. Um, so that was always really, really good to go back and look at. They have started to have some questions on areas that I never thought before.
Interesting.
I do have some flammables inside the hood, so I'm going to have my CO2 suppression system and all that. So just kind of trying to understand, is it one that's going to send out a supervisory signal? Is it going to see that flame and kick off the CO2? Is it going to give a 15-second siren to kind of give people a heads up, like run, leave, because when that thing goes off, it's a really violent. Um, I hate to say explosion, but just
No,
kind
I
of
yeah.
yeah, you know.
Dispersion maybe.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. Very good. And
Yeah.
it
No, I know
sounds
exactly
like
what
a
you mean.
shotgun
Yeah.
too. So it's really loud too at the same time.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Is going back to your discussion of chemicals and knowing what's on site and having flammables now in these hoods. Do you have any advice for any early career individuals when they first enter a site or are first kind of new to a facility, things that they should check, knowing their hazards, knowing their employees' jobs, et cetera? Do you have like a top five list or a top few list of things that people should have a knowledge of when they first get on site?
Well, I'd say that for me, one of the things that I like to do is to like literally walk through every door, open up every single cabinet, really just try and understand things that's out there. I look at the SDS book. If it's under things like PSM, I'll look at the PSM. I'll trace out the lines, the diagrams, and um, it's not a uncommon thing when you work in a gigantic chemical plant that you find a pipe that doesn't have a label on it that well, I wonder what that is. And you can walk, in both directions and can't find a label, can't find an arrow, can't find anything. So just things like that. I like to also like literally look at the book, and I wish I could check every single chemical out there, but I obviously can't. Just start to open up the cabinet, and I have found that you do get stuff that's all the way in the very back, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a SDS, but it might not have been ordered in a long time, so it may have the old one on hand. It may have one that's really kind of spotty at best, and you could have had you could have had one that in the meantime they've had a lot of great data, but you have the old data on site then. So, and this is one that if you can get some help, because it can't be you that does all this. You can't sit down and I have one site that has 247 chemicals. Well, I can't sit down and call 247. Now there's probably 200 different companies, but I I can't sit down and say I need to have the latest and greatest out there. So there's a lot of fantastic software companies out there, and you sign up and you say, hey, here's my chemicals, and it'll make a list for you, and it'll give you that most updated sheet out there too. That really helps out. Um, I have found where some companies don't want to pay for that too. But to me, the cost is really small. I think they were charging about $5 a SDS. But by the time that they make the calls and they do everything and like organize it, I think it's actually money that's saved for us
Yeah,
as safety guys. So,
yeah, no,
but
no, that makes sense.
I know that it was just a very long answer, but you just literally open up everything, try and understand everything. There's going to be a old crusty guy who doesn't want to talk to anybody. You go find him and you say, let's walk through a couple of scenarios. What are the hazards in your job? Because some of these guys, not like they were really educated, but they've learned over the 30 or 40 years of working there that maybe they didn't have a safety guy, and after there's a couple of accidents or things, well, they've kind of figured out like, well, I walk here. When I see a puddle here, I don't walk inside that puddle. I'll go left and right, and so it is kind of interesting if you kind of watch somebody walk through a place. Well, how are they going left and right, and are they ducking underneath the pipe to take a shortcut, or do they take the aisle as they're supposed to go get from point A to point B? So,
Do you find it valuable for going into these facilities to look at what maybe a predecessor had done? Looking at previous employee monitoring to see what they have monitored for, what the data had shown, to kind of either inform you what historically has been done or what you may be able to improve as far as understanding what employee exposure hazards could possibly be.
oh yes, yes, yes. Any of that data that you can find from the previous person is going to be great. It's going to be awesome. You can also go back and look up that person's name, and if that person is there still, you can then go back and say, oh, it's Operator Jones over in Unit 3. You can wander down to Operator Jones at Unit 3 and say, "Hey, I heard that there was some sampling in the past." Let's just kind of go over how the guy did it, what your everyday job was out there. And that really also, I think, helps to build that whole. We're just trying to make things better out there. So some people in the workplace have tried to make things better, and they've been beaten down. And so over the years, they've just kind of learned that, well, it's just a job. I just keep my mouth shut and I do stuff. Well, if you can talk to them and say, so how do we make this better? Out, they have some fantastic ideas, really good.
Yeah, and I think it's and I have seen it where they kind of view you as I'll just say another arm of their leadership where it's important to convey to them, listen, I'm here for you. I'm here to
Yes.
protect you, and sometimes people are very receptive of that. Sometimes they're not. So, I mean, it very much depends on your approach and how people trust you. And I think a lot of this is, we were talking earlier, a lot of this is about building trust, building those relationships.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I can think about when I was just a young bald-faced boy that I really thought, well, I'm just smart. So I say something and people will just sit down, and listen to me and I never have to follow up and I won't have to do things. Well, you learn pretty fast that you still have to build that trust out there. You just can't walk in and say, yep, I'm just like the other safety guys that you had that all stuck around for a year or two. But, like I'm here now. So a lot of those guys are thinking that way. Every single one of you guys has come in here. You've all had these great plans, and not that you didn't want to execute these plans, but you all left in a year or two. So
It's very true. I have seen some of these positions can be revolving doors, and it's not to say that is not in any bad way, but it's just a fact of life.
yes,
It's either there are lots of different variables. So, I'd like to get your perspective on this, and we had talked about um, earlier, and I mentioned early career people, and I have seen from, like I said, an industrial hygiene standpoint, I've seen it safety too, is there has been, I'll say, a change in who is interested in this field, to get them um, more excited about it. I'll say where I went, the University of South Florida, they started an undergraduate program to kind of hype up public health and get it going earlier on. Where do you see, I'll say, the safety and health profession going as far as uh, individuals that are entering the career path? What is going to be needed of them in the future, and how that, along with advancing technology and sensors and everything else, is going to impact them as they proceed in this profession?
yes, yes. So I hate to kind of almost pigeonhole safety guys, but it almost seems like it's really going to attract that person who wants to do good, but you also have to be a independent person. You have to be willing at times to talk to your boss and say, well, I get it. You want me to work on this stuff, but I really have to base my work on what the greatest hazard is. And then I can kind of work down. Luckily, I haven't had it too much, but at times I have seen where it almost seems like people want to broadcast like this victory, and you're kind of like, well, that's awesome, but that's not really that big of a hazard. I mean, we did take care of it. Well, let's focus on the big hazards first, and then we'll focus on the hazards, that are not that. Let's call it the consequence is a whole lot lower. Um, the one thing I have found that really helps out is you will run into folks who say, well, it's very nice for you on first shift because you work in a very controlled atmosphere. You have your coffee. You're always working when the sun's up and all that. But if you really, really want to see things, come on in on second and third shift. And so those are things that young person is going to have to say, yeah, okay, I'm coming in on second and third shift then. And sometimes companies don't really want you to do that. They want you to have a very structured workplace. Um, and I do think that some, in talking to friends, are really scared because they feel really good about safety when you're there, but they're not too sure on second and third shift what really happens out there. So I think that some of them are a little scared about that. Um, when it comes to things like sensors, really, really dive in and understand technology now. I mean, we're really at that infancy now. If you can jump in, understand that software, understand what it can and can't do, and not just that, but go back and challenge these manufacturers out there because they're probably after the ones that they could say, oh, well, historically, people sample for HCl. So I'll go for HCl and ammonia, and I'll go for the big ones. But maybe there's a couple of ones that you could find out there still, and folks haven't focused on things like arsenic or phosphorus or something like that out there still. Um, and it's not that they don't care about folks; they just literally just don't have that market. And so you could have a mix of, old and new. You could also be stuck with, I literally can't find anything except this one style, this method, this one tube, this one um, filter. And so you could have a whole mixed bag out there. The key is to sit down and figure out the hazards and make sure that you are altering for the hazards, not being stubborn and saying the hazards have to alter for me, out there.
That's a very good point. That is important for people to understand. Well, David, I think you've given us a lot to think about today on the podcast. We've talked about exposure monitoring sensors and your experiences. And I think that for those that are interested either early in this career or moving forward, it is going to be a great place for people to be. There is, I think, more so now than ever, a focus on workplace safety, whether it's safety in processes or indoor air quality or what have you. There's more of a heightened focus on this profession. So I appreciate your insight today and your time.
Thank you, Alex. If I could give you just one more boring story for
Oh,
30
sure, of
seconds.
course.
So I got into safety. I was dating a girl in college, and I was just a young guy who was just kind of drifting. I literally didn't know what I wanted to do. I switched majors probably 4 or 5 times, and just kind of really couldn't find anything. And I talked to this guy, and it was just like, so there's a job out there that you're going to do both desk work and office work, and you're going to help people, and I was just like, wow, that sounds awesome, and that's great. And for me, safety has really been almost like a calling. Of course, I only dated that girl about a month or two, but I kept in contact with him for like the next couple of years, and it was awesome and great just to literally hear his stories. He couldn't take me to his workplace and really see things, but just to know that it really is out there, something that you're really passionate about.
I think that's great. And I think, and maybe, I've seen it. Maybe talk to people as you did, learn
Yeah.
the experiences, see if you can come shadow somebody or understand what it is to be exposed to it,
Oh,
to
yes.
understand, even to have a day. So you can, like you said, it's great. Sometimes you're in the field, sometimes you're in the office. It's a great mix. I
Yes,
completely
yes,
agree.
yes. Yes, sir, exactly.
Awesome. Dr. Ayers, thank you so much for
Okay,
joining us today for the Exposure Scientist podcast.
great. Thank you, Alex.
Of
See ya.
course.
Have a
Take
good
care.
day.